Obolensky.
Obolensky. Thank you. And he's speaking to us from Uruguay. He's got three novels out. One just came out in July. And
Sure.
I was in looking at the synopsises of them on Amazon. So you want to go there and check them out because the ratings are extremely high. So that means that he did a good job.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that.
So tell me how you got into writing, Ivan, and how you got into Uruguay. And we were just talking, he said they're moving back. And where do you plan on moving to?
Florida. Florida,
Oh,
probably Central Florida. Florida, I like the state anyway. Also, it doesn't have state taxes, which is sure pleasant.
uh-huh.
And but I got into writing, but my wife has a translation company, and we did a lot of the manuals. If you saw or read a manual for Toshiba or Konica Minolta, chances are we did it, particularly if it had to do with Latin American Spanish. And my wife said, "Oh, she listened to me and goes, okay, you need to write stuff. So here's what I want. I want an article from you every month. It can be, first of all, it started with language, which, I knew so little about. And then, but then eventually expanded to just about anything. And it had to do with, economics or history or anything that struck my fancy, which was really great. The problem with that was these articles were translated into Spanish. Yeah. And so there were numerous translators and editors that had to go through this. So it was incredible. I had to really clarify my thinking. It was just, everything had to be clear. And I did that for numbers of years, from about 2011 to 2017. And it was an extraordinary education. And so
Mhm.
eventually I be good, at least in my estimation. So I said, okay, so I've always wanted to write a book. I love ghost stories. I love mysteries, and I love, the mysterious and, the mystical backgrounds of things. I suppose that it's a Russian thing. Sure it is. And so I said, okay, I've got to do this. And my grandmother was Alice Astor, and she
Oh,
was, yeah, my great great grandfather went down on the Titanic. I mean, it's, when you look at Titanic and you see, him going, oh, there's great 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 granddad. But anyway, she died reading, according to my father. I wouldn't see him very often, but I saw him at the St. Regis, and we would have lunch. And one of the discussions was that she died reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or at least one of the copies. And I went, "Whoa, that is really strange." So I mean, that was filed away for future references, and there was a lot of tales and interesting thoughts about that. But W Magazine did a piece on her and thought that she might have been murdered. And I was just like, oh, this is like, I didn't think so. I didn't, although I
perfect.
read the article and I went, yeah, it's, interesting, but it's possible. So I decided that was sufficient for me to write a story about that. And so I did, and that became Eye of the Moon. And of course, then I went off to do something else. But my wife said, "No, wait a second. We need a second. We need a sequel in this. Everybody loves this book. Go and
Hmm.
write it." So I eventually did, and then I wrote a third. Ultimately, there will be four, and it'll be like I think I'll call them the Rhinebeck Quartet, and
Oh,
there'll be four of them. But my next project is a nonfiction. Again, going back to all the articles that I used to write, I decided to do one on the challenges of success and failure as processes, and from a system point of view, and which is different, because success and failure are actually pretty much the same, except for the outcomes.
yes,
So
it is. But you can't have success if you don't have failure because you
true.
won't recognize it.
That's true. I totally understand that. So I'm writing that away, and of course I'm using that for how successful I'm going to be and what works. So it's interesting because I use my storytelling ability
Mm-hmm.
in to get the ideas across that I'm trying to express. And oftentimes, you with your statistical and mathematics background, a lot of these concepts are really, really intense. And so how do you do that in simple words that somebody's going to understand and not just go to sleep, or impress them with formulas that go on for several pages with symbols that nobody could, unless you were really versed in the subject, know what they're
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. By the way, I have something that I use to help me with that because I get real wordy and I need somebody to come in that practices Stephen King's way of writing and just gets rid of everything. I
That's
go from
true.
1,000 words to 6,000, 60,000.
Yes, I totally understand that. I mean, I did that. I mean, mine is I tend to repeat the same thing over and over, until
Hmm.
eventually, and you go, okay, well, that takes care of two-thirds of it. But the Stephen King thing on a dear reader, I don't think he called it a dear reader, but I call it a dear reader because my wife is my dear reader, and she's the one that reads everything, and it's fantastic because I can watch her and see where she loses it. And
Hmm. Hmm.
the only suggestion I would say is don't leave the dear reader at the end of a chapter, which is like a cliffhanger where it's something
Oh,
bad about to happen. Not good. Do not do that.
oh, I try to do that with mine because I'm science fiction romance. So it's
Yeah,
built in to have a cliffhanger at each chapter if you can. The thing is it has to be resolved in the next chapter,
yeah, that is very important. But
or put, it's okay for now,
yes.
something like that. But yeah, but I was going to say that one of the methods I use to help keep me on track is actually autocrit. It's a software program that will go in and analyze and tell you how many repetitive words you have, how many repetitive phrases you have, how long, you can compare it to your genre or to certain authors and stuff like that. So it's been a real workhorse for me.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, and it's just an incredibly good program. I highly endorse it. I'm not an affiliate with them, but it is something I truly believe in because it's helped me so much because I graduated from school in 69.
Hmm.
I hadn't had any English
Whoa.
uh-huh when I started writing for in 2019. So I worked with a developmental editor and she helped me tremendously. And she
Well,
basically taught me how to write again.
that's terrific. I also, one of the great things about writing when you're older is you have a tremendous amount of experience,
Hmm.
which, particularly on subjects and, emotional issues, which the young may not have necessarily encountered, heard about, and whatever, but have never really lived.
Hmm.
So managed to do that, it gives it a bit more depth. One of the things I do to keep things on pace is I go back to the ancient Greeks. I took
Oh,
out an awful lot of ancient Latin and Greek and all that type of thing. So what I worked out was my novels have to take place within 4 days. So that means
oh,
that everybody has to really get with it and get with the program because everything has to be resolved within 4 days. And that's it. I mean, it's like, and I use it as it's a long weekend. People
hmm.
arrive at this mansion and stuff happens and conflict occurs. There's no phones because it takes place in 1977. So there is no, as a matter of fact,
No cell phones. No,
no cell
no,
phone, no,
uh-uh.
not. So
No.
people have to, and also because it's a small enclosed space, people they have to confront each other. And everybody has to be there. Meals rule the day. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, you have to be at lunch is it's a sit down lunch. The only time where there's not assigned seating is at breakfast. And that's at 9. And if you don't show up at 9 and you're late, you don't get invited back. Actually, that was the rule of our house when we were when that was. So, it's one of those things. It keeps the action going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a,
And that's the whole thing is mine sometimes take place over a year or like the first book I published last year, there was a 200-year span. But the main character was was in cryogenic stasis, but she didn't age in that
Lord.
200 years.
Wow.
And it was to get her to another galaxy, to another planet.
Hmm.
But there were, 14 other ladies with her too. Anyway, but that's, my when I have a 200, that's just a scene break.
Yes.
And go on to the next one. And my readers expect something like that. But with yours, with your stories, just from what I read of the synopsis, you can't do that. It's more like an Agatha Christie that you have to, because hers were always short periods of time, and it was
Mhm.
always a limited number of those that were accused or
Yeah.
participants in it. I think the most she had was 12, but
Yes.
she usually had 10 or less. And I just did a talk on her. That's why.
Well, the good old Agatha Christie, no, she was a genius, and she was
Oh,
also, a terrific chemist. And I definitely used some chemistry, particularly in the third one, where poisons start to enter in and things like that. But I do like that sort of format. I also everything I do is with dialogue, as opposed to
yeah.
with action, and that's an interesting one. I happen to really, I really was moved by Jane Austen and Edith Wharton, when
Hmm.
their work, but I particularly like surprises. And you got to have twists. You
Oh,
got to
yeah.
have. If you don't have a twist, it's just not the thing. So
Hmm.
oh Henry, it's just I love that stuff. So I throw that in, and because I don't know, I don't write with an outline. I just start with a situation and continue on from there, and it's all pretty much continuous as opposed to discontinuous. And each built on top of it. So I have no idea where the plot is going. It's really scary, particularly, after you put a year in. And I begin to fret. I think about endings, a lot. I am like I'm always conscious of the ending, because the ending has to justify the middle, and the middle has to be justified by a great beginning. And you have to,
Hmm.
all that together. So plotting is important. And then, of course, how it's interesting. And I suppose the ending has to be plausible, but totally surprising. Even though it's inevitable,
Yeah.
that's one of the really good things is it's all there if you look.
Yeah.
But you just don't know, because the reader doesn't know the importance of such and such an event. And the author is great, because he's sort of like a god, and can sort of, he only gives off information a little
Hmm.
bit,
Hmm.
which
Well,
is fun.
I originally was told I was a pantser, which is
Mhm.
basically what you described. And then somebody said, no, no, the term today is discovery because you're discovering as you go along.
Well, that's very true. But you gotta have faith. You gotta have faith in I paint myself into terrific corners.
Oh,
And
I love it.
what you get paid for is
Hmm.
to figure out how to get out of them, which is really fun. And
Yeah.
so I'm like I'm always sort of, particularly when I'm getting near the end, my wife is usually going, "Oh my gosh, he's going towards the ending. God help us all." I mean,
Oh,
it's bound to be tough. but I've gotten better at it, and particularly on those around me. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm going through a crisis, so I try and minimize the effects.
Well, I can understand that. I actually started baking because my characters were taking off and doing stuff I wasn't aware of. And I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I've got to think of some things to go with that. But, you can't still your mind when you're still sitting there.
No.
So I always baked. So I started baking professionally. And
Wow.
it paid for editors.
Yeah, of
So
course.
um I would go out and bake for a while and then come back in and I'd have my answers. Because with
This is
baking,
very,
you just follow the recipe. There's no thinking involved.
yeah.
It's chemistry, so it has to be exact.
Mhm. Yes, it does, and the sequence has to be correct. Oh,
Uh-huh.
that's terrific. I wash dishes.
Or, another thing I have done is take naps because a lot of times my time for writing is 3 to about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And then I write throughout the day if I have opportunities, but that's when appointments are.
Yeah.
So I have one friend that um, we have time, we schedule time before early because she lives in Israel. So it's 4 o'clock my time in the morning and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon her time. And then we sit and talk. But it's if I have somebody special like that, or I have somebody that I'm going to interview that's in Europe or something, then I schedule them myself early because I can always take a nap. I can
Yeah.
always find time
Yes.
somewhere, somehow to
It's
make up
funny.
for.
No, I tend to be writing bed in the early morning. That's usually when my mind is pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, it depends. If I'm not careful, I will go all day, and that's usually not good. And then I'm just plain weird and hard to live with. And also, if you live with somebody, you have to take into account that element because otherwise, you get that horrible, oh, there's the author off in his little ivory tower, and that's all he does, and that's wrong. Oftentimes, it's very interesting. I found that outside events enter in, and they help shape the plot
Mm-hmm.
because all of a sudden, it's almost like magic. This thing happens, and you go, "Oh, that's perfect. I had no idea about that." And then, you use that and throw it in. So you have to live it, I think. But it's great fun. I can't tell you how much I enjoy it.
Oh, I can't, you know, the idea of not being able to write now,
Yeah.
because what I did before was all nonfiction, statistical or religious things
Yes.
that I wrote, and that was more challenging than this in a sense of my imagination just gets to go free.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
and
that's
that but I prefer writing early in the morning also because if something should happen, um, I have I have myself available,
yeah.
you
Well,
know,
that makes a lot of sense.
and in
Also,
the house is quiet.
yeah. Well, for me, I've got other work. My wife has things saying, okay, this needs to be done. This has got to go out. And, I'm going to be working on that because, that's where the money is. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you're always have that constraint. But, it's not to say that one doesn't think a lot. I mean, writing to me is an awful lot about thinking. You have to be clear in what it is, your thoughts are. You cannot, sometimes, it helps to write it down and the writing clarifies it, but it's best often to just think about it for a while and take, some time out, drink several
Mm-hmm.
cups of coffee and consider it.
Gotta
What do
have
you do
that coffee.
now?
Gotta have that coffee.
Oh, Tell me about it. I know they have really good coffee down here in Uruguay, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah, they do the espressos, and it's again, it's very Spanish. Uruguay is a funny place. I mean, it's only got 3.4 million people in it,
oh
and it's
wow, it's
oh
small.
yeah, it's like this the size of the state of Washington. So it's pretty sparse. Most of it is in Montevideo, which is the capital, and then it's what's called Campo, which is just out of nowhere. It's very funny. It's a lot of electric cars being promoted, and you sit there and look at the charging stations. Well, they're down in one area, in the middle of the country, nada. There's nothing happening there. But it's the weather is temperate and it's very tranquil. There's not, I mean, you can feel everything happening in the north. You know where north is because wherever there's a disturbance, you just point in that direction. And
Mm-hmm.
when to the south, we live on the coast at Punta del Este, which is sort of like a resort town. It's Antarctica down there. You
Hmm.
just keep going straight and you're going to hit it. It's that Southern Ocean, and that can get really exciting. And then, of course, Argentina is giant. I mean, it's probably a country that has, I think it's the third greatest country in terms of resources in the world. Unfortunately, they've had a problems with their government. Their ability to do things politically has not been the best. But barring that, it's the most amazing place you'd ever want to know.
Yeah, I know. No, it wasn't Argentina. When I was stationed in England, I was in the Air Force for 21 and a
Mhm,
half years. When we were stationed in England, the I played volleyball and
mhm,
we took second place in the United Kingdom. And so we went to Germany to compete against the other American bases.
mhm.
But one of the gals, she was married to Peru. He was from Peru,
Right.
not Argentina, but he
Yeah.
was our coach.
But one of the things also that everybody does here is drink mate.
What's that?
It's like a tea. It's actually related to mistletoe of all things, and you find that people drink it all the time, and it's
Hmm.
particularly I like it when it's just plain. It's got a sort of a smoky taste, not unlike Lapsang Souchang tea. It's got that
Okay.
smoke sort of type of thing, and but it's a stimulant, and but it doesn't give you the buzz that coffee gives you. It sort of gives you a sort of a mellow it, but your focus is pretty intense. So if ever, I'm really in a tight spot writing wise, whip out the mate, I just drink that and it's great because you have a metal straw and there's a whole procedure on how you make it. And you have to do it precisely, and everybody has their own ideas of how best to do it. It's a very funny thing.
Well, you were talking just now, you said that about when you hit that wall. I
Yeah.
just did a class on that. If you
Oh,
want, I'll
really?
send you my worksheets
Mm-hmm. Oh,
that,
that's
it's
beautiful.
kind of like one of them is kind of like a check sheet that did
Yes.
I try this? Did I try this? Did, that? And then 25 prompts
Oh, wow. Well, that's
to,
interesting. It's fun, I mean, the whole trick of writing is to get yourself into a real pickle and then
hmm
come up with a surprising solution to it. And enough so that the reader also is like going, what are you going to do now?
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's why I included the prompts because you could always put your characters in those prompts.
Wow. Well,
Because
that makes
the
sense.
writing class I go workshop or that I go to every other week here, we usually do a prompt. And what she's got 27 books out. And
Wow.
what she'll do is whatever book she's currently working on, she'll put those characters in it.
Oh, wow.
And then it gives her a chapter.
Well, that will work. Mine unfortunately take, years to write. I don't know why, but I tend to take a year and a half to 2 years to write it.
Yeah.
write a book. And I'm, again, it's usually something I'm work on. I mean, I'm usually thinking about it all the time. It's even
Hmm.
if I'm doing something else. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking.
Yeah. I know some people that think about it for 20 years.
Yeah.
So you're Speedy Gonzalez.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if you do it for 20 years, also the likelihood of you actually completing it is much less.
Hmm. But and for you to come up here, you're talking also about being able to advertise it more, market it more.
Yes. And also, the other thing is I'm there personally. I mean, like the Miami Book Fair or something like that. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I will sell them in buckets if I have a face-to-face contact.
Hmm.
And it's great to be able to do that, but it requires one's presence, and
Yes.
just the light that you can shine on it. And that can only be done personally.
Yeah, we just I belong to Arizona Professional Writers, and I'm a president of the local chapter. And we just put on a book festival at the beginning of this month. It's the first one up here in the mountains, and we had just a fabulous turnout, and huge crowd came throughout the whole time. And so it was a very big success. And, one young man, he was 22. He's a cartoonist. He put his cartoons together and made a comic book. He sold out,
Wow.
you know. Another guy I work with quite a bit because he does dark fantasy. I do
Mhm.
the sci-fi romance, and another gal does mystery. We do a lot of events that are locally. And we usually sit together and kind of back each other up if somebody has to leave for a few minutes. But we sell well. But he made a record. He sold 19 books. Yeah. Yeah. He was floating on cloud nine
Well, no,
over that.
there's nothing like a good book fair. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it makes a big difference. And particularly with all the people, one of the things on my rule is I never sit down,
Yeah.
because they're
That's a
always,
very good one. Some people like to, like I have another writer friend that she writes sweet romance, and she
Mhm.
always stands in front or tries to get an in booth, so she has that end to stand at and talk to people. I sit sometimes, sometimes I stand. Depends upon if I'm finishing a book
Yeah, yeah.
or a short story. Speaking of short stories, don't you write short stories too?
I did. But I wanted to, and short stories are really fun. I like them, but I like the novel format better because I can make it more complex.
Hmm.
One of the things, I've always thought with short stories, you have to focus much more, and it's also getting that twist in there is you're restricted in terms of what you can say and what because everything has to be towards that end. It's like
Hmm.
it's like a joke. A joke has a punchline, and so everything has to align towards that punchline. And a short story means that you have more room than a joke, but a novel, you have breadth. So
Hmm.
what you take many elements that nobody would ever consider being part of something, and all of a sudden you weave it in, and there it is, and that's really really fun. So you can change the context with just a twitch, and everything looks different. And that takes a novel to do it, and particularly if you want to. Again, you can get lost in the verbiage, I suppose. So a novel has to require a lot more precision, even though you're given a lot more freedom. You have
Hmm.
to be very precise because you have to end up somewhere, and everything extraneous has to sort of go. So
Yes.
I find it a challenge, but I also I love essays,
Hmm.
particularly about diverse subjects, and take something from, say, mathematics, and take something from history, and combine them
Oh,
into
yeah.
something. Yes, I know. It's really fun. Again, it's the stupid things like, the curse of knowledge. Everybody looks at gravity and you go, well, okay, Newton, and you've got the, gravitational laws and stuff like that. And you go, oh, that's really simple. But was it described and how was it actually discovered without that? And now that's a really whole different concept because you don't have any of the, oh, of course, gravity is a force. Nobody knows there's a force.
Hmm.
And so, it's interesting in that regard. And, I think that happens a lot here too, where everybody looks back and goes, oh, those idiots. Well, they weren't idiots. They just didn't know.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the earth is flat.
Yeah.
They could only go so far. So of course it had to be end right there. It couldn't go beyond that.
But what's so weird? They didn't think that the world was flat. Only a few people, and the writers who were the academics of which were passed down, thought the world was flat. Almost
Mm,
everybody else said, no way. And that was known all the way for the Egyptians and the Greeks thought, they knew the place was circular. They even figured out all sorts of stuff. No, it was a lot of academics who put that forward, and everybody said, oh, you see, the world is flat. But we use the flat world all the time with a map.
yeah.
Maps are really good. And
Yes.
God help you if you ever put it in spherical coordinates. Can you imagine? Okay,
Oh,
so it's much more utility than being a map. But no, that's the type of stuff. I love things like that, and I love the intellectual. It's like to me, it's like intellectual candy, and you have to have that because when you look at something or some concept where you go, whoa, that is mind blowing. That's the type of thing that is great, and you live for that because those jewels make everything else that went
hmm.
worthwhile. So
I heard one time the gentleman that promoted J.K. Rowling's.
yes,
And that he said that it was the wonder in her story. It was like, oh my gosh, what? Oh, every story, whether it's a mystery or science fiction or historical, it needs a sense of wonder because that keeps the attention. And that, if we have the wonder in us, it can transpire. It can transfer rather to our stories. And then
no,
that
I
will,
agree with you. Yeah, it's like what I call the X factor. You
mm-hmm.
know, and you see it. It's like one of those things where I remember I think it was one of the vampire ones, Dawn or one of those, and Stephen King was not too pleased with it and said it was sort of, you know, and I read it and I said, wait a second, no, she does have it. There's
Mm-hmm.
that quality that was in her writing, and you
Mm-hmm.
said, I knew, man, that would be a book,
Anne
and
Rice, was that Anne Rice?
not Anne Rice. It was the other one, the one who did it was modern. I mean, they made films about it recently. I can never remember
Oh,
these names.
okay. I know. I think
But
I know him.
yeah,
I,
the one that takes place in Seattle and in Washington, and
oh
she was a
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but it was masterfully done. And what it did was it had an X factor. And that X factor, you see it in museums. You go around a corner and then you see this painting and your mouth hangs open. You go, how did that person do that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the wonder, and I love that, and I think that's really an important thing to cultivate. Very hard to put in a bottle.
Yes. And it should be contagious to anybody who picks up the book.
I agree. Totally. Totally. Yeah, I live and dream of having and creating works where that is the case.
Yeah.
Some of it, I mean, mine has a bunch of that, but it's like you want one that's just exudes it, and you go, man, that has impact. and,
Yeah.
and it's great when
Yeah.
you can.
To me, it's also one of the main reasons I write is for people to have an escape, take a
Mhm.
vacation. You
Yes.
know, it's a very inexpensive vacation, but it gets them out of, if they have a bad reality and they're struggling to get out of it, it's something that they can go to and find a place to hide in
No,
and
and
become.
yes, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think of it. I mean, I took, Tolkien's, I've had one of those. I was in England, so I had one of the ones where all three of the volumes were in one giant book.
Oh,
And I
wow.
just kept that around all the time. And whenever, and I was usually feeling pretty weird anyway, I would, use that and it would ground me. And that was a wonderful thing. And books have always done that for me. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's like you use your imagination and you can escape into that, and it's fantastic. And if you can do it in such a way so that it helps a person deal with whatever they're dealing with, just even if it's just the shift of attention out of it and into the problems of somebody else, you then can come back to the ones that are in real life and you're like, oh, maybe that isn't so bad, or ooh, maybe this is a way to handle that. Always fascinating. And I appreciate it when, because, again, it's the intention behind it is so
Mm-hmm.
important because it's not there to impress, it's there to communicate a world and a different point of view. And maybe, one's the hardness that one gets, the assumptions that one make sort of get a little bit, shaken up a little enough for a change to occur. And
Mm-hmm.
that's always pleasant. I mean, that's the best thing.
Oh, yeah. It can totally change somebody's life. All the
Yeah.
books that I have read over the years, and I'm talking, when I was in high school and junior high, I'd hide underneath the covers with the flashlight and
Yeah.
read 4 to 5 books a night
Wow.
and, sleep for 2 hours and get up and go to school just because I was hungry.
Hmm.
I was hungry for adventure. I've been somebody who never stays close to home.
Hmm.
My friends always live miles away.
Yeah.
And it helped me bridge that.
Yes. And,
It's,
and that's one of the great things about reading. I mean, film doesn't do it. I mean, film can, but the thing is about reading is you consult the imagination of the reader, and the reader is a participant.
mm-hmm,
And of course, he can interpret all the things. So it's a lot of what you don't say is really important because the reader has to put that in himself or herself.
yeah. And for
And
us as writers, that's one of the hardest things to do
that
is to trust them to do that.
that's true. Well, my view on that was really funny. We were from all the way back. Remember, tragedy in its original iteration in Greece was an ecstatic experience. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
it was for Dionysius, for heaven's sake. So, that's going to be a main thing. So you have that ecstatic, that ecstasy that was supposed to be imbued by viewing these. The catharsis that Aristotle talked about. It's like that emotional welling up, so that there was a sense of community. And that's that's funny because everything from the novel to film all come from those roots. I mean,
mm-hmm,
that's where it started. And it's you have to have that. And I think it's really important because that's the fundamental upon which all of what we do, you
mm-hmm.
know, upon.
Yeah. Well, I believe just on reading the synopsises, you're going to have people that reread your books.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I know
Yeah.
I've read them hundreds of times myself. I know that's really, you sit there and go, why would you ever want to do that? First of all, I found them interesting, but secondly, because when I go to do the next one, I have to read all the other ones that went before, and then I take notes of all the little threads. and I take them and I then weave them into something else again. And also, so yeah, I'm glad, and I hope so that people do read them because that's what they were designed for.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but I have friends in books,
Yes.
and I just want to go and visit them again.
Hmm.
But I
Oh,
also discover things that I didn't discover the first time,
right.
or the second time, or the third time.
That's true. And, and as a writer, I throw in all sorts of references that if you sort of, they're not something that you would totally see, but in the way something is phrased or the what is being alluded to, there is a whole history that goes behind that, which if you
Mhm.
know it, and now you add it to this, you get a whole different flavor of what it is, you're reading. And that takes, getting somebody to read it a book once. It's terrific. But if you can get somebody to read it two or three times, I think that's exceptional. And some books are really worth that
Yeah,
effort.
they are. And that's my prayer that people will turn my
Yeah,
characters into friends and come and visit them.
that's
So,
one. No,
yeah,
I agree with you totally on that. I think that's great. It's something to be to strive for, and hopefully, it happens. And then, I mean, how what would a writer, it's what a writer wants.
yeah,
It's like it makes it all worthwhile.
yeah. Well, I think about you carrying that tomb of Tolkien around. How many times did you read it?
Oh, I don't even want to tell you.
But the thing
I know
is,
almost every word in that book. I know it's really bad, but I'm glad it was that because it was that quest type of thing. And there were a lot of others that I read too, because I read voluminously, but it's they were very special to me, and
yeah,
made it was like Robert Frost poems. You know what I mean? It's one of those
oh, yeah,
ones. You just got to go grab it, and you read some of them, just four or five, and you just go, and your mind gets blown every single time, and you go, good heavens, this guy was good.
yeah. My favorite current poet at the time when I was a teenager was Ewan.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah, I have books by him, and so it because that's how I got through English. I loved
Yeah.
English, I loved writing, but I hated the the way my teachers took give me my grade on the paper. They just mark it, not give you any constructive criticism, any help in finding a way to work around that problem. They
Right.
just ripped it basically apart. And so I just started writing poetry because they couldn't do that to it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. No,
Yeah.
it's that whole learning to write is yeah, I think you've got to read a lot
Yes.
to know what good writing is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see it, you go, whoa, and then you've got to figure out how the person did it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've really got to look at, I'm watching I think the Kevin Burke biography of Hemingway, which is
Oh,
really interesting. And I think it's in like three or four parts, but really interesting man. His life and his writing are very different, and getting the context is very, very different. One definitely looks at it totally in from a different point of view. But how that man did what he did was extraordinary. He took out most of the adjectives. That was one of the things you never think about that. But then,
mm-hmm.
of course, he was a reporter, and if you have to cable your stories back, you want the least amount of verbiage as possible because it's costing money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I
Yeah.
know you take into extremes, but it's interesting to see how that was done.
Yeah. I know he had some different ways of how he wrote.
Mhm.
At least I haven't, I've just read snippets or somebody has told me things, but the biggest thing that I have found in reading other people's work is, especially now that I'm writing, is trying to stay in my own genre, once in a while escaping and going to something else, just to broaden me, because I want to write mysteries, so I also watch mysteries and read mysteries. But predominantly, I read what I write because I want to be on the cusp of that curve and ride the wave to the
Mhm.
end, not drop off.
Right. No, no, I totally understand that. And also I think you've got to write what you like to read.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because it's very funny. Isabella Allende, right, was so I've seen her a couple of times, and she was in Miami, and she said, and the lady asked her, said, well, who's your favorite author? And she said, well, I am. I will read my work more than any other person. So of course I'm going to have to be my favorite author, and I make myself my favorite author. And that was a bit of an eye opener because if you're a writer, you're going to read your work more than any other writer that's living or dead.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like it, you know something wrong there. You're going to have to change something, and that's all I can tell you
Yeah.
because you have to be your favorite author.
Mm-hmm. I got a question for you. Do you ever look at your book, go through your book and say, wow, I wrote that?
I do on occasions. I mean, I will sit there and go, man, that is a fine piece right there. There are certain parts where I go, okay, I'm satisfied. Again, one of the reasons why I suppose one looks and I read my work again is it gives me the certainty that it's it's good,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you go, okay, yeah, you did it right there. And I think that's really important because it takes tremendous amount of confidence. I mean, for a writer to write, you have to have something to say. And one can sit there and go, how is it going to be reacting to by the audience? And the audience is the ultimate test. But if the writer believes in its own writing, you can withstand a tremendous number of slings and arrows and shots and things like that. And eventually you go, it's okay. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they want to think. I mean, you know,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. I was going to ask one more question. When are you guys thinking of coming back to the States?
Next couple of months.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll be there very soon. Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Getting here was exciting. Going back is going to be exciting. And with all that amount of change and at the same, writing, I can pick up, that's a great thing. I got a computer, I got a laptop, I can write anywhere.
That's
It
it.
doesn't matter what's happening. I can go off in my own world and I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And wonderful. And it's a saving grace in that regard. A piece of
Now,
stability.
do you have a website?
Yes, IvanObolensky.com. That's IvanObolensky.com. I have a blog,
Okay.
which I do usually. Again, I've been writing on it. There's other things that go in on it, but usually at least once a month. I was writing oftentimes every week, every Thursday it comes out. And if I get in, where there's not a lot of work, I can come up with an article every week. And it's really great because it keeps my mind very, very fresh. I have to constantly be creating. I'm always under the deadline, which, unfortunately, I work well with deadlines. You know?
So is your blog on your website or do you have it
Yes,
separate? Okay.
no, it's on my website, and it tells a lot. There's a lot of stuff about me, I suppose, and about the books. The main thing is read the books. The books are fun. They were meant that way. That's why I wrote them. They are there to absolutely enchant and instill in people a wow factor and to go, holy wow, how did that happen? And that's what I want. And it's I think I've achieved that in a lot of ways. So that's which is really cool. And I just have to get people to read it.
Yeah. Now, do you have it as an ebook and paperback and hardback, or
Yes.
just
We have a lot of like the first one is in hardback, paperback, and ebook. All of them are in ebooks, and all of them are print on demand. If you want, and we've got them now, NetGalley and various other places, so they're getting put in libraries. And it's funny. Writing is one-third writing, two-thirds promotion, and
yes?
because otherwise, and it's amazing how difficult that is.
Mm-hmm.
It's for people who are successful. My hats are off to them. I applaud them. I say, well done, because that is a feat, and one has to be really proud for having accomplished that. You
Yes,
know,
they do. And I would say we are both onto that.
yes.
Um, as the founder of Transcendent Authors, that's my desire is to find speakers who are transcending,
See.
because that means growth, that means uh, a true future,
Hmm.
and a willingness to just take it as an adventure or a quest and
Hmm.
go for it, not just sit and be down in a status quo and
Yeah,
that's all you have to do. We
exactly. Yeah, one has to somehow, you know, writing done well exudes the very best that humans are. And
mhm,
you have to, which is, they are fabulous. Not all the time, but they are. And it's great to know, and writers can do that. They can make it, you can make a world that's better just because one sees it from the glass half full as opposed to half empty. And I think
exactly,
that's
exactly.
important.
Ivan, it's just been great talking with you, and I can't wait for you to come to the States and then maybe take a trip up here to Oregon and come up to the mountains.
Oh, yes, that would be delightful. American West, there's nothing quite like it. I mean, oh, that'd be great. Well, I would love to see you, and we are going to do that, and we will be doing it. And, hey, somehow, some way, we will connect and remain connected.
Okay, I hope so. I truly hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And thank you all for listening and hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, bye bye.